Hi guys, in this video I'm going to cover one-dimensional dynamic arrays. Before we do that, just a reminder, go to excelvbasequel.com. There's hours and hours of video you can watch, and you could also download the workbooks there and put in your email here, and you could receive an email when new videos go up. Okay, so let's get started. So in previous videos we looked at one-dimensional static arrays. And let's just say that we have a column like this, numbers, and I'll just put some numbers in here. And what I want to do is put these numbers in an array. And now remember what an array is. It's a structure that holds data in the computer's memory. Okay, and you could access that data whenever you want, once it's in memory. And it's useful because a lot of times you want to just put this data in a structure and then not have to go to a worksheet to find it. So that's why arrays are useful. And in a previous video, like I said, we covered static arrays, meaning the size of the array was statically declared and it can't change. Okay, so we set up an array that was a size 3. So we set up an array of size 3, and we put in some data. In the first index we put this, second index we put that, third index we put that. So we did something like that. But the main point was that the size of the array was fixed because we knew how many elements we were going to be dealing with. And if you didn't watch that video, go watch the video on one-dimensional static arrays. Because now we're going to go one step further and say, what if we don't know the number of elements that we want to put in the array? So let's say one day we come in and the workbook has 3 numbers that we want to put in the array, but the next day it has 4 numbers, and the next day it has 5 numbers, or whatever, or the next day it has 9 numbers. So we want to be able to handle that situation. However many numbers I put in this column, we want to be able to put that in an array. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is create a loop and just loop down starting in row 2 and go down column A until I find a blank row, and I'm just going to put these numbers in the array. Okay, so let's get started, and I'm just going to start off with 3 elements. Okay, so I'm going to loop down this column and put these in an array. So let's go to the editor, Alt F11, and let's insert a module. And I'm just going to write a sub 1. Actually, you can't start a sub with the number, so I'm going to put 1D. Okay, so what are we going to do? Let's start a variable to account for the row number. So dim_r is integer. And now let's declare an array. So I'm going to put dim nums. And just a reminder, before in a static array, when we knew the size, we just put in the size there, 2. And remember, arrays are indexed at 0, so when I put in 2 here, it actually means that it can hold 3 elements. Okay, so we did something like this before. We did dim nums 2 in parentheses, so here's the name of the array, and then in parentheses you put the size of the array. This is what we did before as integer. Okay, so this is what we did before. And I'm going to now show you how to do it when you don't know what size it is. So you just take the size out and you do it like that. So now you just have dim, the name of the array, with open parentheses. Okay. Now what we did is just tell the computer when it runs this code that when it gets to this line, it's just going to know that there's an array. It doesn't know what size it is. It only knows that it's an array and it could hold integers. Okay. Now let's set something up. So let's do r equals 2. That'll tell us which row we're going to start looping down in, and then let's declare another integer here, I as integer. And remember, you could declare variables like that. So now we want to redimension the array. So we do redim nums 0. Okay, so what is this about, this redim num 0? So when you don't know the size, the number of elements of your array, what you're going to be doing is, let me go back to the workbook. you're initially going to only set a size equal to 1, because you know at least you're going to put one element in there, or that is in order to put an element into an array, you have to have at least one space for it, right? So right here we are declaring the array, we are redimensioning the array. That's what redim stands for. It means redimension the array to size 0. Now what does that mean? Well, let's loop through and or let's step through and see what this does. So I'm going to put a watch on nums. Okay. And right now, notice nums, it doesn't have any value, and it doesn't have any tree into button. Usually you get those tree intos buttons. So let me bring this up a little bit. So when I step into this again, what I did is after it hit that line and I stepped through it, now look, we get a tree that we can tree into, and there's a node that comes off that says nums 0. Well, that means this is the first element in the array. So this redimensioned that array to a size of 1. Remember, arrays are base index at 0. So when I put nums 0, that means it can hold one value. Okay? If I put nums 2, let's just step through and see what that does. So here nums was declared 2, and there it is. It can hold 3 elements because arrays are based at 0. That means 0, 1, 0, 1, and 2, and that's what you see down here, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so that's what this redimension does. It redimensions the array, meaning resizes it. So initially it had no size, and what this line does is it resizes the array. So I'm going to just put that in resize the array. Okay, so we want to resize it just to hold one element, because we don't want to resize it to hold like 15, because we want to keep the memory condensed and as small as possible, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to redimension it to 0 so we could hold one element, and we're going to then put this element in that open space in the array, and then we're going to redimension the array so it can hold one more element. And that's all we're going to do. As we loop through, we're just going to have that array in memory and put an element in it, and then make it one bigger, and then put the next element in it and make it one bigger, and then go around and do that. So at the end of this loop, we're going to have an array that can hold 4 elements, even though it only put in 3. Okay. If this had let's say 6 numbers, we would have, the array would always be one element bigger than the size of the array. So if you had 1,000 elements, there would be 1,001 spaces in the array, because when we loop through, we're always going to make it one bigger after we put a piece of data in it. We're going to resize it so that it's one bigger. Okay, so let's do this now. So we do until cells r comma 1 dot value is equal to blank, r is equal to r plus 1, loop, and that's the loop to go down the rows, right? And we start at row 2 here, right? And then all we're going to do is do nums I. So this is how you put the value in the array. Nums I is equal to cells r comma 1 dot value, right? And now we're going to increment this index here, right? Because when we go around again, we need to put it in the next element in the array. Okay, so this is incrementing the row, but the row starts at 2, whereas the index I starts at it should start at 0, right? So that's what I declared I up here. I'm going to set I equal to 0, because this is going to be the first element in the array. So once I do that, I equals 0, when we go around that loop again, I need to set it to one bigger. Okay, so this is the increment index of the array, and this is the increment of the row. So this is really what we're concerned with in this video, is this line right here, where we're putting a value onto the array, and then so it's going to go into the array at index 0. Well, the next time around the loop, we want it to go in array at index 1, and that's what this line is doing. It's going to make it 1 bigger. So initially, I is set to 0. After it puts in that value, I is equal to I plus 1, which means I is equal to 0 plus 1, so I is going to be 1. Okay? But now remember what I said we're going to do. We need to redim the array to size I. Actually, this line up here should be moved, because we want to, the size that we're redimensioning it, that we're resizing it, is going to be equal to the index, the next index, right? So we put the value in the array, we make the index of that array 1 bigger, and then we resize that array to what is in the variable I. Okay, so all we're doing here is having a structure that initially can hold 1 element, and right here it's going to be able to hold 2 elements. Okay, so I'll show you what happens, and we're going to run into an error here. Not an error, but you're going to see something happening here as we step through. So look what happened now. Okay, so let me close this out. So there's 1, 2, 3, right? That's the first element. And now nums0 holds 1, 2, 3. And that's what this line did. Nums0, because I is 0, is equal to cells r1.value. Okay? And then we incremented I, so I is now equal to 1. And now I'm going to redim nums. I'm going to resize the array to 1, which means it's going to be able to hold 2. So watch what happens. I get an array with 2 that can hold 2 spaces, right? That can hold 2 elements. But look what happened. Where did 1, 2, 3 go, right? That's a problem. Because the value in num0 used to be 1, 2, 3, but after this line it went away. So not only do you need to resize the array, somehow we need to preserve the value that was in the array. And what you need to do here is write this keyword in, preserve. And preserve here is going to preserve the data that is in the array when you resize it. Okay? So resize the array 1 bigger and preserve data. So if we didn't have that preserve here, you saw that when we just resized it, the values in the array went away. So we need to write this keyword preserve to make sure that the data doesn't disappear. Okay, so now let's step through and see what we get. So right here, redim preserve. If I look into nums, I resized it so it can hold, I is equal to 1, which means the array can hold 2 because the array is 0 based, meaning the first element is 0 right here, num0, and then nums1, so it can hold 2 values. The first value is 1, 2, 3, which is correct. And now since we did preserve, it actually kept the 1, 2, 3. And now we could keep looping, and there it put 3 in memory in the array. And now we're going to increment the index and again redimension it, so now it should be there should be 3 nodes here, and there are, and we're just going to keep looping, right? So if I put a breakpoint here and press play, I should see all the values that I see over here plus 1 extra, because the last time through the array we do resize it to be 1 bigger. Okay, so we have all our values that are in the worksheet. They're now in memory, and there's 7 numbers, and well, actually no, there's 6 numbers, but our array goes from 0 to 6, which would mean there are 7 entries. So this 0 here, this is due to the fact that the last time through the loop we are resizing the array, because we don't know what's coming next. We always presume that there's going to be another value. Okay, now you could write some code to check and see only resize it. You could put an if statement to see if the cells are +1. I mean, you could get around that, but I think it's sufficient to just build an array and have it have one extra entry, because I'll show you what we'll do next. Is now we want to print the array back to the worksheet, because now you want to be able to access the array and print it out and use it somehow. So I'm going to print it back to the worksheet. And how we're going to do that is by using the Ubound function. And Ubound is the upper bound of the array. Okay, so let's see what the upper bound of, I'm just going to put message box, and I'm going to put Ubound nums. Okay, so I'm just going to run this, and the Ubound is 6. So what this means is the array is 0 base, so that means that there's 7 elements. So Ubound says, what is the size of this array? And it looks in the array and it says, how many pieces of memory have been allocated? Well, there's 7 pieces of memory going from index 0 to index 6. That 7 pieces of memory have been allocated due to us resizing it every time. Okay, so we have 7 pieces of memory. So now we know how many elements there are in the array, and we also know that the last element is always going to be 0, because we know that our logic here was to resize it no matter what, so that at the end we're going to have one extra entry in the array that's always going to be 0, because we're never going to put anything in it, because we're going to come out of the loop. The last time through the loop we finished the loop, but we did resize it here. Okay, so now I'll show you how to get around that. Let's print the array. And what I'm going to do here is just put output. And what I'm going to do now is do a for loop. So for loops are good for printing arrays or dealing with the arrays. So for I equal to 0, 2, now we're going to use Ubound nums. Remember, Ubound was 6, right? But we know we only want to go from 0 to 5, okay? Because there's 6 numbers, which means our array starts at 0. This would be 0. The 0th element in the array, this is the first element in the array, second, third, fourth, fifth. So we go from 0 to 5, and we don't want to go to 6. So all we need to do here is go Ubound nums -1, okay? And then we do next I. And when we print the array, we want to start in row 2, so I'm just going to put R2, and I'm going to put next in the for loop, we just do this. We do cells R, 2 dot value. Now how do you access the array? It's real easy. Nums I, and then we have to increment the row, right? R equals R plus 1. So this is the loop to print the array. It's really short, it's really simple. And this array, again, is going to go from the ith index in the array. So let me just run it up to here. So right now we have a nums array that goes from index 0, which is right here, to index 6. The Ubound, the upper bound of the array, is 6, which means there's 7 elements in the array. But we don't want to go to Ubound. We only want to go from 0 to 5. We want to go from here to here. That's all we want to go to, because we know this last one is never going to have anything of meaning in it, because we know that we resize it and we always put an extra one on. So we want 0 to 5. Ubound in that message box said it was 6. So we're going to go from 0 to 5, because 6 minus 1 is 5. Remember, this Ubound nums has the value 6 in it. -1, which means this right of the 2 has a value of 5. So we're going to go from I equals 0 to 5. And I here is used to access the array And let me just put that back. We put the name of the array, and in parentheses we put I. And that's it pretty much. So let me just step through this, and you could see right here in this column we are looping down, right? And all those numbers are going into the cell. And then the next I, let's see. Yeah, so we stop at 5, which would be Ubound minus 1 is 5. If I remove this -1, watch what happens. I'm going to clear this out and watch what happens now. If I just run it, if I remove that -1, so there's no -1 over here. So now we're going from 0 to 6, right? So this 0, we're going num0 to num6. So we should see this 0 in this cell down here. And watch, we're going to see it. And it's just going to keep going because now I is 5 and now I is 6. So there's the 0. This is the 0 right here. So this 0 is that 0 right there that's in memory in that array. Okay, so that's why you put a -1 here, because we don't want to ever see this 0, because we just have that 0 because of our redimensioning up here. And like I said, you can build some logic in to get around it, but I don't think you need to, because all you need to do is put a -1 here. Okay, and that'll take care of the fact that there's an extra entry in the array, which you know about. So it's not an error, it's just however you want to program it. Okay, so let me just run this again, just so you see it from start to finish. So if I just press, I'm going to get rid of this and just press start. Okay, there's my numbers. If I keep going down, let me just put some real dummy numbers in here. So if I run it again, let's see why we get a debug. Oh, I didn't think I pressed stop here. Let me put a watch on this to see what that is about. R equals 12. I equals 10. That should let's step through and see what's happening here. Let's see if we get this far. Okay. Anyone want to take a guess why this is failing? So what is my array type, right? When I just put dummy numbers in here, what is my array type? My array's type is integer, right? Integers can only hold what? They can only go up to 32,706 or something ridiculous like that, right? So really, if I'm going to be just throwing in numbers around and I don't know how big they are going to be, this should be long or something. Yeah, this definitely should be long. Okay, so we could take this breakpoint out, and if I just run this, that was the problem. So it got to row 12 and it tried to put 43,255 into an array that could only hold integers. And remember, there's a video out there on excelvbasequel.com that goes through what can the variables hold, and integers can only hold numbers up to 32,000. So it caused an error right there, right? So let's run this now, and there you go. Okay, so because I changed this to long, it can hold those big numbers. The variable can hold the big numbers. If you don't understand that, go watch the video on variables and you'll see. But okay, so this is working. I could put in 1,000,000 rows down here, I could just keep expanding this, and we're gonna get exactly what we want. We're gonna get whatever's on that worksheet. We have an array now that's in memory that we can use, and we could access all those values, right? Okay, so that's it for this video. Remember, an array is index starts at 0. So you know, put a watch on the array, and you'll see that whatever's in parentheses here, that's the index of the array, and you could access that by putting things in parentheses, you know, by doing things like this, right? And you put a variable in the parentheses, and you access whatever value is in I0 when I is set to 0. If I is equal to 50, you'll access whatever's in that array at index 50. But remember, the index starts at 0. Okay, so when you do Ubound, you got to remember that. So if it says Ubound, the upper bound of the array is 6, well, you know that there's 7 entries in the array. If the upper bound is 99, you know that there's 100 entries in the array, because the index starts at 0. Okay. Another thing to remember is static arrays, they have a number inside the parentheses when you declare them. That is the size of the array. So this is an array of size 4. In our case, this video was about dynamic arrays, and we do not put the number in there when you declare the array, right? So this is, and if you, to go a little bit further, just as a refresher, is you know, you declare the array with dim, meaning dimension. Here's the name of the array. You put the parentheses open for a dynamic array, and then you put the type as long, which means it can hold long. And as we saw, this is important because we had that problem with the integer, right? So the dynamic arrays, you don't put the size in the parentheses. You have to use redimension or this redim keyword also. And then when you use that redim keyword, then you put a size in the parentheses. Okay, and when you want to make it one bigger, you have to use redim preserve, or else you're going to lose the data. You're going to use redim to make it one bigger again, but if you don't use preserve, you're going to lose that data. So that's what, remember, that's the preserve thing. And you know, you put the data in the array like this. You know, you assign a value into the array. When you want to retrieve that, you just do the opposite. You put the nums I on the right hand side, and then whatever you're assigned it to on the left. Okay, and when you print the array, it's good to use for loops. So remember all that stuff. Okay, so that's all this video I wanted to show you. I'm going to save this file. I'm going to put it up on Excel VBA there's, you know, over 10 hours of video right now. There's going to be more hours added. I'm going to save it, and you can download it on the website, and also go here and sign up and put your email so you could get new videos to watch them. If you have questions, just contact me here on this contact link. Okay, but until next video, I'll talk to you later. Bye.